Close your eyes and imagine. What if the things in life that cause us the greatest pain, the things that bring us grief, are challenges? Challenges designed to help us grow, to ultimately become what we were always meant to be. We feel like we've been buried, but what if, like a seed, we've been planted? And having been planted, we grow to become a mighty tree. Now, open your eyes. Open your eyes to this way of viewing life. Come with me as we explore your true, infinite, eternal nature. This is Grief to Growth, and I am your host, Brian Smith. Hey everybody, this is Brian Smith back with another episode of Grief to Growth. And I've got with me today a guy I'm really excited to talk to. His name is Anthony Chene. And Anthony is a filmmaker who makes films basically about NDEs and about consciousness and who we are. And he's a really popular YouTube channel. I've been following Anthony's work for a long time, and I'm excited to have him here today to get him out from behind the camera to in front of the camera so we can get to know a little bit more about Anthony and what makes him tick. Now, Anthony did go to business school before he became a filmmaker. After going to business school, he worked in media journalism and audiovisual production, and he worked as a video reporter within companies, media agencies, and TV channels. And now he works as a freelancer where he directs and does video reporting for various clients. And he also develops his own projects that we're going to talk about today: documentaries, video clips, and fiction. Anthony is based in France, but he does travel on a regular basis for his productions. You'll find out that Anthony's first language is not English, but he speaks English better than I speak French anyway. So we're going to have a good time here today. So if you do want to contact Anthony, I want to give you his website, and I'll mention it again later, but it's Anthony Chene. It's ANTHONYCHENE.com. And with that, I want to welcome Anthony to Grief to Growth.
Hi, nice to be here. So yes, as you said, I'm French, so I hope my English will be good enough for the interview. I'm not used to have people interview me, so hope it will be fine.
Yeah, it'll be great. We did a little pre-interview, and I'm sure it's going to be fine. I'm really excited to get again, as I said earlier, I want your fans to get to know you a little bit, and we're going to talk about your work and all that kind of stuff. But before we do that, tell your fans something that they don't know about you. What would be like something that they would find unexpected about you?
I don't know. Yeah, you already said, like, I went to business school in France before I started to make videos as a job. So I never did any class in filmmaking. I just did a few classes in audiovisual production.
Mm-hmm.
But so I learned pretty much everything myself, like the sound equipment, the lighting, the camera stuff, you know. So yeah, that's one thing.
Yeah, I have to say your films are beautiful. They're so well done.
Thank you.
They're so well put together. The way that and I'm most familiar with your interviews where you sit down people with NDEs. I just recently became aware of your documentaries, and your documentaries are really wonderful too. So you've done a really great job of educating yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, when I watch these documentaries, the older documentaries, I'm kind of very critical of myself. You know, I always think I can do better, so I try to always find the details that I can improve. So
yeah. So you went to business school and you're working in the business world, and you weren't really satisfied with that. So is that when you decided to get into filmmaking?
Yes. It's a long story because it took me like a few years to make the transition from the financial, the business school and the financial world to what I'm doing now. So It was not very easy. But yes, I could not fit into this corporate world. So it was like it was a failure for me, you know. I couldn't do it. Like, I had so many friends that were able to to have a career in the as a financial analyst or in so many jobs like that, and I couldn't make it. It was like horrible for me.
Yeah. So when you
yeah.
decided to get into filmmaking, do you think that was more the artistic thing because you wanted to be creative, or was it the spirituality?
No, at first it was the creative side.
Okay.
I didn't know all the spiritual subjects I'm dealing with right now. I didn't know these subjects when I started as a filmmaker. First, I started to make videos for a few clients in France, in Paris. Just try to find new a few gigs, as they call it, like a few jobs to make money, and it was for various companies, for publishing companies. I did so many small videos like that. And I had a YouTube channel about economics, about the financial crisis. So I did the same that I'm doing right now, but I was interviewing politicians. I was interviewing economists about the financial crisis, about the subprime financial problems that we had. And I got I got bored with these subjects because after a few videos you're always saying the same stuff. It's like nothing is going in the right direction. It's there is a real estate bubble, a financial bubble. It's going to explode someday, but it's not. So it's kind of boring after a few videos. So
yeah.
And that's when I found the first videos about near-death experiences a few years ago. I was already like 27 or 28 years old when I first heard about near-death experiences. And I was very, very curious about that because I couldn't make sense of what happened to these people. And so, yes.
So I'm curious, what was your spirituality going into that? I understand that you were, I understand you were raised Catholic. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so what was your spirituality when you first heard about these NDEs, and how did that line up with what you thought before?
I didn't have any spirituality basically when I heard about these stories because I'm not, I don't practice religion, so it's like, I didn't have any spirituality, and I don't have any family in this spiritual stuff. I don't have someone who is psychic or things like that. So it was very, very new for me. It was a whole new world open to me. But I think that something resonated within me about this stuff, because I remember, like I already said that in other interviews, but when I was a child, I had some how can you say it, some intuitions about the divine and things like that. So I think it's like it was a part of me.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common for us. I think as children, we kind of have this understanding of this knowing, and then the adults teach us things, right?
Yes.
And they kind of goes away for a while.
Yes, I think everything I did in business school, it was not the real me. It was just something I tried to become to fit in this world. Make a living and please your family and these kind of things. But it was not me. And what I discovered after, I think it was the real me in a sense. So it took me like 28 years to discover something about me. It's kind of strange, but
no, I think it's very common. I think a lot of us go through that. So was there a particular event or something that triggered this discovery?
Not really. It took me like I remember it took me like I was 27, 28. It took me a few months. I was listening to a lot of interviews. I've read some books about near-death experiences, about about the Egyptian pyramids, also about personal development subjects. And no, I didn't have like a near-death experience or a big awakening, but I did have some weird dreams at this period of time. Remember some dreams about people, like it was a strange dreams about people telling me like that I had to do videos about these subjects, you know. It's hard for me to explain that in English because it was some kind of really weird dreams. But it was not like a conscious thing, you know. I was not channeling anything, or I didn't have during the day a big awakening. It was just during the night that I had this information coming. And I think it played a big part in this process, but I'm not conscious of it, you know. It's
well, a lot of people that have had NDEs tell us that at night we visit with the other side and we visit our loved ones and our higher selves. And so do you think maybe that was your higher self or your guides saying to you, Anthony, it's time to...
Yes, it's always tricky to, at least for me, it's hard to answer this question because I'm not a psychic. I'm not consciously psychic, you know. So I don't really know. There is what we call the veil of forgetfulness in English, you know. So I really have a strong veil. So I don't really. It's not like I'm humble or I play something. I really don't know. But I think there is we all have a higher self, or maybe guardian angels or spiritual guides, as you say, and. Before we come into this world, we all have a plan, you know, kind of a plan before, and we have some checkpoints, I believe, during our life. You know, at some point you have to do some stuff, and if you're not doing them, like for me, I was doing completely other things. That you have like maybe your higher self or spiritual guides. They wake you up. They give you some tips, like you have to go back to your trail. Like this kind of stuff.
Yeah, like a course correction. It's like you're going along and you just need a little nudge in the right direction.
Yes, but it's very subtle, you know.
Right.
It's at least for me, it was very smooth. So you don't realize it. But I remember that before that I was kind of depressed about what was going on, like professionally in my own life and in the world in general. You know, I was very depressed. So it's kind of a feeling like you have to do something else in your life, but you don't really know. At first.
No, I completely understand what you're saying, and you're right, and I think it's interesting as you're into this subject so much, but I can still tell you're a little bit skeptical, and your intuition that you're not speaking like, oh yes, my guides came up and they told me this, because I understand that feeling, you know, the dreams and the waking up in the morning and having the inspiration.
It's very interesting what you said. I don't feel I'm skeptical, but I just try to be very accurate and honest about what I experience, you know.
Yes.
I cannot tell people like, yes, I can definitely know my guardian angels are talking to me, or I don't really know for sure, but I came to the conclusion that there was something guiding me, because I couldn't do myself. I couldn't do it alone. You know what I did, like this American channel, this YouTube channel. Just it would have been too hard. So I must have some help. And it's like I have there are two parts in me. Like there is the regular Anthony, you know, who is fearful and who just, I don't get it most of the time, you know, what I'm doing. But there is a deeper part in me I can feel sometimes that is very confident about what is going on. And I just, how how can I say, in English it's harder for me, sorry, but
No.
there is a deep part of me that just know. Sometimes you just know that you know.
Yeah.
And I can feel that sometimes.
Yeah, that inner knowing that
Yes, and it's not a belief, it's just you know. I know what is going on. I know what I'm supposed to do, but at the same time, in my daily life, I don't know. So it's really strange. Just have to show up in faith, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I love the way you put that, and that's a thing I think about being human. One of the real challenges is some people call it the small self and the bigger self, or
Yes.
the ego and the higher self. So we have that part of us that, you know, we're walking around going like, what is going on? But we can tap into that other part of us that says, yeah, here's what's going on.
Yes, it's all about. It's always the same subject. Is don't be fearful. But it's easier said than done, as you say in English. You know, it's very easy for me to say, okay, don't be fearful and do this and do that, but then you live your own life and you are fearful.
Yeah. So how did you get?
Sorry.
How did you get started with the NDE interviews? Who was your first subject?
So at first I did that I did these interviews in French. I still have a French YouTube channel with which it's bigger than in English because it's older.
Yeah.
And so I did a lot of people in French at first with you don't know them in France, but some are quite famous in this area. And then I had a very strong intuition that kept coming back that I had to do it in English in the US because I knew California from my business school. Because I had to do international internships to validate my business school. And I happened to find an internship in the Bay Area in California, completely out of the blue. And so then I used to go on vacation and in California a lot and in the American West. So a few years later, when I started to be a filmmaker in France, I had this strong intuition to go back to the US and do the same kind of videos I was doing in French, to do the same in English.
Oh, wow.
That's the story.
Well,
and it was a nightmare. It was horrible because I had like almost no money, you know, all the usual stuff when you begin. And I didn't know any family in the US. So I just started to make videos. And I got some help one way or another. I had some people helping me, like finding near-death experiences, like Barbara Bartolome, I try to say it in English, who was working for Helping IANS, you know, the association.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So she helped me find some people, and other people helped me to find some people, and I started to build this channel in English. So that's the story.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad you did.
Yeah, well, it's like the trips were not very easy to make. Like I used to spend like 2 weeks in the US, you know, they come back and I did the editing in France. And that's how I started in English, yes.
Do you remember who your first subject was in English?
Yes, it was the documentary called Beyond Our Sight.
Oh, okay.
About near-death experiences, and a psychic medium called, two psychic mediums, one called Terry Yoder and another called Savant Champel, and as well as 4 near-death experiences in the story. And that was my first documentary that I did in San Francisco.
Okay.
And again, the conditions that I had to make this first documentary was like, when I look back at what I did, it's like, how come I was able to go through the process? It was like, it was impossible. And So that's when I really had to to trust and to follow the guidance, the intuition, because
Yeah.
it kept coming back. Like, you have to go back to California, do this stuff, do this stuff. So where
So,
does it come from? I don't
yeah.
know.
So when this was coming back, would you say this was a waking thought, or was this more of a thing in that dream state again?
No, it's like it was in dreams.
Hmm.
In my dreams, I had some powerful dreams about coming back, and also during the day, like the idea. And I had many synchronicities and many signs about going back to the US.
Hmm.
And sometimes I got like angry at the other side, even if I don't hear them. Let's say, like, I'd say, okay, you want me to do that? Look, I won't do it because it's too much. It's just too much. Like, I won't do it unless you help me. And
Mm-hmm.
then, like, a few days or a few weeks after that, I got like exactly what I needed to go back.
Hmm.
And it's repeatedly, like time after time.
Yes. Isn't it interesting how that happens?
Yeah, it's really strange. Even when I talk about it, I'm thinking it doesn't make any sense. But
well, the great thing, Anthony, about you sharing that and about the work that you do with the NDEs is then we realize that we're not alone, because a lot of us have experienced that, and they're like, is this my imagination? Am I just making this up? I'm talking to myself,
yes,
and
yes, it's a great question to ask. Like, yeah,
yeah. So, good for us that you trusted all that. So now, how do you choose your subjects for your films? Because you've got so many, and there's so many people to choose from. So, just curious what that
yes.
process is like.
Um, there is no real process. I listen to a lot of videos. I read a lot of books, and I try to see what could be done.
Hmm.
But as you say, usually I have so many things that I can do, and the problem is, like, how can I organize myself then to do all the subjects that I want to do?
Right. Right.
That's usually it's this kind of question. It's the other way around, because I have many ideas and many subjects that I want many documentaries I'd like to make. So it's an ongoing process. And sometimes it's really strange how it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people come to me, or I receive emails, or I receive propositions at the exact at the very time that I need
Yeah.
the thing. So you never know.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think about, now that I asked you that question, that logical side of me, right? Saying, okay, how do you do this? And
Yes, yes, and I have it too, this logical side, because I used to. I'm very mental,
mm-hmm,
very. I want to understand everything. I want
mm-hmm,
to ask questions. I
right.
always want to I want to understand everything, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like that, but I learned that you I just cannot. I it's very strange, because the when I talk about myself, like, it's the thing I understand the least. My own process, like, the famous question. I always have this question. It's like, why do you do these subjects?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you doing all this? And it's like, I don't have any simple answer.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that we're having this conversation, because you talk about in your films, and I've seen it when you did another interview I saw with you, this idea of intuition versus knowing rationally.
Yes.
And I can tell you're a really deep thinker, and people like you and I, we want to understand, well, how does
Mhm.
this work? What's the logical basis for it? And having to trust that this intuition goes beyond that.
Yes. Yes. Yes, it's yeah, exactly. And I think the creative process, like I think it must be the same for musicians or for creative people. Like there is some part of the process that you cannot grasp.
Right.
It's like
Right.
a channeling, an unconscious channeling. It's very weird.
Yes. Yes. I completely agree. And so that and what you said, we're trying to earlier, we're talking about like teasing this thing out. Which part of this is me and which part of this is something else or something outside of myself? And the answer is we don't
Yes.
really know, right?
Yes, because I'm always very afraid of making things up. When you say I look like I'm skeptical, it's
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to make things up for myself. I don't want to become someone like I'm. I don't want to lie. I don't want to lie to myself. I
Right.
want to be very honest, as honest as I could about what I do, and so I know I'm not a psychic, I'm not a medium, and I think there is a higher plan for every one of us.
Mm-hmm.
We just have to trust what's happening, and but yeah, that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah. I'm curious because you said that I think there's a higher plan for every one of us. Did you have that idea before you started studying NDEs, or is that something that came to you after you started listening to the lessons from the NDEs?
It was after, I think,
Mm-hmm.
after when I started to discover these subjects about, let's say, about spirituality. I understood a lot of things about myself and about my own life until then,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because it before that it just seemed chaotic and random. I went to California, I did this and did that, and came from this part of the world, and after that I realized that everything was here for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing was random, and nothing is random. Everything has a, when we say everything is perfect, it's not that like everything is nice and cool, but it's everything has a deep reason. Everything happens for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to find out, even when it's painful and hard.
Mm-hmm.
We have to find out the reason and the meaning behind all this. Why are we going through this painful event or things like that? So yeah, yeah, I think our choice is, we have the freedom to react either in with love and with faith, or with fear when something happens to us.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I forgot your question. Sorry.
Well, I wanted to ask
'Cause-
you because I was asking you about this philosophy you have that everything
yes,
happens
yes,
for a
yes,
reason. I
yes.
was asking, did that come from the NDEs? Because I did want to ask you, with your studying of NDEs for as long as you have, what are the lessons and what are the lessons you've taken from NDEs? What do you want people to get out of your films?
I think obviously, the first thing is that we don't die like as we think we die.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the body dies, of course, but who we really are beyond the thoughts, beyond the body, and beyond the emotions, who we really are uh, doesn't die.
Mm-hmm.
That's the main message behind the near-death experiences. It's like death is nothing. It's just in a blink of an eye. It's you go through this 3D world, and there is something else.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are many messages behind the near-death experiences. I think it's like everything happens for a reason, as I said, and also that when you go on a life review on the other side, you understand that your actions, they had an impact on other people,
Mm-hmm.
what impact you had on other people, and you experience other people feelings and thoughts towards you as if you were these people. That's oneness. Like at some level, you're not just the person you think you are, you're just the whole scene. Everyone is the whole scene at some level. And when you are on the other side, you just get that. And you experience the whole scene, not just the you think you are. Okay, so that's another lesson, and yeah, so many lessons. But it's always in the end, it's always like don't be fearful, things like that. You live your life and follow your intuition. And it's very hard to follow your intuition in this world because it's like a whisper. The intuition is very subtle, you know. And in this world, it's very stressful. It's very everything. So it's very hard to follow this little voice. But that's the thing we have to do. Yeah. So many things I could say about.
We'll get back to Grief to Growth in just a few seconds. Did you know that Brian is an author and a life coach? If you're grieving or know someone who is grieving, his book, Grief to Growth, is a best-selling, easy-to-read book that might help you or someone you know. People work with Brian as a life coach to break through barriers and live their best lives. You can find out more about Brian and what he offers at www.grieftogrowth.com, www.growth2growth.com. If you'd like to support this podcast, visit www.patreon.com/grieftogrowth, www.patreon.com/GRIEF2growth to make a financial contribution. And now, back to Grief to Growth.
If people were to learn the lessons, if people were to watch your films and take the lessons from it, how do you think the world would be different?
Yeah, it's a very deep question. I have a lot of mixed feelings about this world right now. I don't know about you, but can we save this world? How can we improve this world? I don't know. I think people will. I think we should have more power on ourselves. We should do not listen to everything you've been told and listen to yourself more, to your true self. Like that's the solution. That's the key. The key is within who you really are. That's the real solution. Because the reality we experience, this 3D world, is like, it's just a dream. In a sense, it's relatively real. It's just a projection from inside out. So if we want to change this world, we have to project something else. But not just on a conscious level, that let's say I want a better world, but we have to really, on a subconscious level, on an emotional level, we have to project something else. Every single one of us. So it takes a lot of time to change the world because people have to change themselves first.
Yeah.
So I think it will take time, but I think there is an acceleration going on right now.
So you do believe there's an awakening going on? People are.
Yes, I think so. But there are also many other things going on. So
yeah,
I don't know. I try to focus on what I can control and what I can do, because otherwise I'm like everyone else. I feel depressed. Otherwise,
yeah. No, I understand. I guess I was asking the question and like in a fantasy way. If people could watch your films and awaken to the reality.
Yeah. I think it would be like it's a cliche, like a French word, but it's like the end of the movie Matrix, the one, If I could awaken, or everyone could awaken to who we really are, it will be like the end of the movie, like when he says no, and the bullets, like, they just stop. It's really this kind of stuff, like if you can awaken to who you are, you can project something else.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because I know you mentioned a 3D world, and I've heard people talk about 4D and 5D. What does that mean to you?
Okay, so some hard questions. My understanding is that the 3D world is where we live right now, in space and time, with the brain, the body, and everything. Look, we have to live in this 3D world, but that's not it. There is more. And I think the 4D could be like the astral level, like when we dream, when we go out of body. That some people can go out of body. It's like another level of dimension. It's right. Everything is at the same place, but it's another vibration. You know, it's a little higher. And when we dream, we can access this level, and there is still a duality going on between good and evil, as we think. You know, you can have a nightmare, you can have a good dream, you can. When you go out of body, people often say that you can meet good entities or bad entities, like demons or things like that. That's the 4D plane, but you can go higher and higher. It's not the end of it. So I think when you go beyond this astral level, when you can project your emotions very easily, when you go higher, you can, at some point, there is no duality going on as we think, like good and evil. Just one. Everything is just one. And you just experience that, but it's beyond the words we can use, I think. It's beyond our understanding. You know, we are guys, we want to understand everything.
Right.
And we cannot get that, like there is no bad. And people will always say there is no bad things, everything is perfect. Like people will always say, what about children dying hungry? What about murderers? All these kind of usual examples. And I don't have an answer. Like,
yeah.
Why? You don't know. You just know that this is not the end of it, what we are living right now. There is something more, but it doesn't mean that we have to escape this 3D world, because there is nowhere to escape. There is only here and now. So heaven and everything else, heaven, God, it's all here and now. But we just cannot see it literally. We cannot see it. We are not conscious that it's all here and now. And that's the job. We have to awaken. We have to remember. We have to remember who we are.
Yeah.
And
so do you, and this is another hard question, but I'm going to throw it out there. So what do you think the purpose is of coming to this 3D world?
I don't, the usual answer is to learn, to learn stuff, because when we are in a body with thoughts and emotions, we can have a lot of experiences. We can feel different experiences that we can only feel here. But very often it's like painful, and it's a lot of people, like especially right now at this period of time, there are a lot of suicides, a lot of depressed people. I know in France, I know it must be the same in the US right now, and in other part of the world, like people, they just want out. They want to, like, what's the point of being here?
Right.
So, but I think there is a point, and I think my honest answer would be, like, at some point we are all, every single one of us is God or the universe experiencing itself from a relative viewpoint. We all are the whole thing. Everyone is the whole thing experiencing itself from a fractal point. And anytime we have problems or questions about what's going on in the world or why am I here, I think the answer is to project something else, to give, to light your own, to be your own light, to give and to project something. that's the solution. I think this is the solution.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's interesting, because that is always a tough question, right? Why are we here? Why does this stuff exist? But I think about the opposite. What if there were no evil? What if there were no pain? Life would be boring. Imagine a movie. Imagine a movie with no bad guy, where the good guy he goes through his life every day and nothing ever happens.
Yes, maybe it's here so that we are forced to do something. We are forced to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was the same in my life. In the beginning of the interview, I said about before I did these subjects and when I was in finance, I was kind of not depressed, but not good about myself. It was
Mm-hmm.
what's the point? But thanks to this kind of emotional suffering, I found other solutions, other ways.
Mm-hmm.
I did this channel and I did a lot of things, but I don't think that suffering is necessary.
Mm.
I think we should have other ways to evolve.
Right.
We don't have to suffer to evolve. But in this world, with our level of consciousness right now, it's like sometimes it's the only way. You have to suffer to get it. So it's horrible when you think about it, but it's because we are not wise enough sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
And
well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but the duality gives us options. So we can come in this world and we can focus on the world as you were doing when you were in business school. Everybody says, this is what you should do. But you realize this is not satisfying me. This is not feeding my soul. There's something more for me. Yes. So you've created this channel and this great service out of that, realizing that other thing was not for you.
Yes, basically that's what I did. Yes, but it's not easy because on the one side you can grasp something, like you will have a job, you will have money, you will have friends or parents or whatever understanding what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So you can grasp what you
right.
would have on this path, but on the other side, the intuition path, you don't grasp anything. It's like, I feel I have to go this way, but that's it.
Right.
So you cannot even explain what you're doing to other people around you. That's why so many people, when they change careers or when they make other plans in their life, they how can I say it in English? It's hard for me in English sometimes to explain.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people lose friends
mm-hmm.
when they change their plans,
mm-hmm.
because you cannot explain what you're doing. What you have a deep intuition and you cannot explain it to other people, and you are left with yourself a lot of the times.
Right. Well, it goes back to the 3D world, and I think for people like yourself and people that have NDEs, they wake up to the reality that this world is not real. So the people that are stuck in 3D are chasing jobs and careers and things that, as you said, they're tangible. They're right here in front of us, but we know that they're not real, that they don't last.
Yes. And for me, it's one way. I try to tell myself this story, like it's a good way to feel good about myself because it's what I experience on a daily basis. But sometimes it was just like a failure for me, like I cannot fit into this world. It's like you see a video game. It's like I saw a video game of people, of cars on the freeways and buildings and all this kind of stuff. And I see that I said to myself, there's something I don't get about this world. Like how can I fit into this world? Why does it feel that I am the only one that doesn't fit into this world? And I'm not the only one, I know, but
that's how it feels.
Seems like it seems, it feels like it. So it's not a good feeling.
Well, I heard your interview with Lee Whitting, and you mentioned the fact when you were a little kid, you had this feeling of like a purple thing in your chest. I think was the way you described it. That connection, and And when I was a child, I didn't fit into the world either. And I would lie awake at night and say, what is wrong with me, or what is wrong with the world, that this doesn't make any sense to me. I was a kid during the Vietnam War, and I remember I watched on television every night people killing each other, and they would show the body count. And I thought, what kind of a world is it when people go out and try to kill strangers? It never made sense to me.
Yes, that kind of feeling. Yes.
Yes. So I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate you. And I think that the thing I love about NDE is sharing this with us, and you sharing it with us through them sharing it through you, is it makes some of us not feel so alone. And we realize that there is something wrong with this world. There's something off.
Yes, because I think right now a lot of people are trying to fit into their life or their jobs or anything, because they feel alone otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about the lack of money, because you can always find a way to make money. It's like I say that, but I used to have a lot of fears about money, so it's not an easy thing. But I can always find a way to make money. But the hardest thing for me was not to feel alone in my job, or in my in what I'm doing. Alone, I mean not alone literally in my life, but alone like am I right to do this? Is it complete nonsense? Does it make any sense?
Yeah, you want to have some sense of purpose, and I was watching the film earlier, your film, Who We Are, and I think it was Dean Radin was talking about, I know a lot of very wealthy people that aren't very happy. And I think one of the problems with this world is once we get that wealth and we think this is the thing, and then that doesn't make us happy, then we're even more depressed because we realize that's not the thing.
Yes, and yes, there is nothing wrong about having a very big house or several big houses and a lot of millions of euros or dollars in the bank account. It's a very nice thing to have, but it won't bring us what we think it will.
Right.
It won't bring us any meaning.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to kind of shift gears a little bit, because I know you live in France mostly. How are your films received in France, or this idea of spirituality? Because how does that go over there?
In France, it's a little different than in the US. The general population is divided. Like, some people are awakening to these subjects, some are not. But on average, I have a lot of people interested in these subjects in France. But on the official level, like, how can I say it? Like the magazines, the TV,
I understand.
Yeah, and so on. They hardly never share this kind of subjects. There is no like a Gaia, Gaia.com in the US. You have this website. We don't have this. We don't really have this kind of organizations in France.
Yeah,
it's almost forbidden, by the state. It's kind of not a good thing to do in France. Not at all.
Yeah, it's still considered kind of fringe here in the US. I think there's more, the internet has helped a lot, channels like yours, where it's the democratization, right? We don't have to get permission to put it out. You can put it out.
Yes. It's a little more open in the US, yes, I think.
Right. And you can put it out.
Ideal.
And I got to tell people, I mean, your films, some of them have millions of views, and your interviews get, tens of thousands of hits. So there's a real appetite for this, that people, you mentioned earlier, as we're going through the things we're going through, we talked right before about, we're not going to get political, but, going through COVID and everything, people are realizing this world is not making them happy. It's not satisfying them.
Yes, and I wonder if it's not the message behind all all this, behind all the things we are living right now as a society. Maybe it's like we have to get something, and we have to get it soon. Like we have to get something, and if we don't, I mean collectively, some not very good things happen and are going to happen, because it's like it's not a choice anymore. We have to evolve now.
Right. Right.
So,
we seem to, and we, it's interesting. We talked about this earlier, that sometimes people grow through suffering, and you were saying it would be great if we didn't have to, but as
yes,
mankind, it seems like we need to hit a point of crisis sometimes before we wake up.
yes, and a French spiritual teacher used to say, you don't have to get a slap in the face every morning to evolve. You can just get it without the suffering. It doesn't have to be that painful. You can just, it's like when you learn something, a new skill, you don't have to suffer a lot every time you learn something. Sometimes you have to, but it's not not all the time. But in the Catholic religion, I was brought Catholic. It's a very deep belief, unconscious belief that we have in France. I think it's like we have to suffer to deserve something. It's an unconscious belief that we have. Like if you don't suffer, you have to show that you suffer, that it's hard, so that you can deserve something.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because one of the lessons of the NDE, I think, is we make life way too hard.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah,
I think it's truth, and yes, it's very simple. The concepts are always very simple, and then it's the application on the daily life that is not very easy. But it's very simple. It's like follow your own intuition, and don't be fearful. Don't blame. Don't spend your time blaming other people all the time and judging people, because very often we think that our problems they come from like other people around us, and it can be true on some level, but in the end it's just all about what we do and what we project. So we lose time when we blame other people. And I blame, of course, when I say that in my daily life, of course I blame other people. Of course I'm judging things. Of course I'm fearful. So I don't want to appear like there is a difference between what I say right now and what I'm living. So just to be clear, it's I have to learn.
Yeah, we all have that. So that leads me to my next question. So what do you do to enhance that inner knowing, that intuition, and to learn to trust in it more and live from that?
I think what I do, like my videos, for me it's the best way to understand new solutions and new things. It's I found this way to evolve. When I make these videos, I learn new things every time. I meet new people. I have new insights. So it's a great way for me to evolve. And I'm a kind of I like the ocean also. The waves, the sea. So when I'm just in front of you just put me like 1 or 2 hours peacefully in front of the sea, and then I get the messages very easily, what I have to do. The flow is very easy after that for me.
Yeah, well, it's interesting.
Very simple.
That reminds me of something that John Butler said in your film, Who We Are, is about we can't really stop the thoughts, but it's reaching that state where we can slow the thoughts down, and whatever it takes to get us there.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
For Western people, yes. For people like us, yes, it's a great way. I think people in India and Asian people in general, it's maybe easier for them to meditate. And for us, people in the West, we have a lot of thoughts, so it's harder. At least for me, I know it's very hard because I want to think about everything. You know, I want to be rational about everything. So a great way maybe is also to walk. You know, Western people, we have to walk in nature, things like that. Because when we sit and we do nothing, for a lot of people, it's very hard not to think and not to have compulsive thoughts.
Right. Yeah, we're socialized that way, and we're
Yes,
told you should always be busy. You should always be doing something. And I've talked to many people about meditation over the years, and they're like, I don't have time. I can't just sit for 5 minutes and do nothing.
Yeah, it's a lie, but yes, that's what we tell ourselves. Yes.
Yeah.
Because when we check what we do every day, like usually we had a lot of times where we just waste our time. We don't do anything worth doing, you know. But we just say, "Oh, I don't have time. I'm so busy," but it's not true.
Yeah. So what are your future plans? Are you planning to continue doing what you're doing? What are some projects you have coming up?
Yes, I'd like to make bigger and bigger projects in the future in English. Like I want the documentaries and the films I do to be more and more professional, more and more impactful, more and more deep. Yes, that's basically what I want to do. I'd like to work with other people as well, you know, like technicians and like have very talented people, like also musicians to compose the soundtracks. So that's what I want. That's the direction I'd like to take.
Cool. So are you doing everything on your own now? You're doing all your production on your own?
Yes, but less and less, because the last interviews you saw on my YouTube channel, like the last 3 or 4 interviews, I wasn't the one shooting the video.
Okay.
Because I was not able to go to the US or to other countries because of this this crisis. So I paid people in the US to film the interview, and I asked the questions through FaceTime, through Zoom. In real time. So I have people filming for me, and also the musics. But yes, I'd like to delegate maybe more in the future.
Yeah.
And of course it takes more money, but I'll find a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Anthony, I got to tell you, this has been a real thrill for me, getting to know you, and I thank you for stepping out from behind the camera, and then I guess I'll get to see you and hear you. I know that people are going to be so excited. I want to tell people, I'll let you tell people, where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, I think you told it, like it's my website, anthonychene.com, or my YouTube channel. You can find me very easily on YouTube, Anthony Chene Production. It was a really good interview for me, but what I found is that it's harder for me to talk about why I'm doing what I do and my own life than talking about the other side, you know.
Sure.
I've never had any near-death experience, but it's much easier for me to deal with near-death experiences than to talk about my own life. You know, it's very strange. You know?
No, I understand.
I'm not very comfortable talking about why I do what I do. You know, I don't have all the answers, and as a rational guy, it's, you know, I'd like to be more accurate about what I do.
Yeah.
Actually.
Well, the thing is, you know, we all have a role to play, and you haven't had an NDE, I haven't had an NDE, and I interview NDEers every day, but that's my role, is to get to bring their story out and get their story to people. And people want to know, you're a very inspirational story. You're a guy who said, I am on a path that I don't really want to be on. This is not fulfilling me. I'm going to take this different path. And it's you're going to inspire other people to follow their dreams. So that's why I wanted to bring your story out.
Yes, and just people, I know there are a lot of people, I personally know some people right now that they just want to change their life, their job, or anything. And just don't be fearful, and just know it's going to be hard.
Right.
But don't be fearful, and you will have a lot of help. And we didn't talk a lot about praying or stuff like that, but I think you can just ask for things. You won't receive anything you ask for. Like most people will ask for $1 million or things like that. Of course, it's the basic thing to ask for. We all want peace in the world, but if you have one wish, we'll not wish for the peace in the world. We'll wish for a lot of money. So.
Yeah. That's a
the
great point.
Human condition.
You did talk about prayer though earlier, because you said when your guides were telling you do this or this, you said, I'll do it if I get help, and then you got the help.
Yes, and then you have to do it. So.
Yeah, and then you have to do it. So there's that challenge.
So I try to ask, because it's so easy, as a rational guy, it's too easy, like just ask with your heart. It's just too easy for me. Like if it was that easy, why so much suffering in the world and all these questions? But I think it's that easy. You have to ask, you have to visualize, you have to be true to yourself, and just the doors will open. Yeah, that's the miracle.
Yeah. Well, we've seen it in your life, and appreciate you.
I don't know about that.
Appreciate what you're doing. You're very,
you too.
You're a very humble guy. It's been great getting to know you.
Yeah, and you too. Like you make people very comfortable, because it was like a stressful thing for me to do this interview, to talk in English. It's not an easy thing, but you made it like good. So
great. Well, great. It's been fantastic getting to know you, and I will talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good day. So that does it for another episode of Grief to Growth. I sure hope you enjoyed it. If you like this content, make sure you subscribe. So click on the subscribe button here, and then click on the bell to receive notifications, and click on all. That way you'll be notified whenever I release new content. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.